Hi, good day, and welcome to my new series, HSB on the Spot. Now, this series I started to develop this series because I realized, for one, there isn't a lot of HSB tutorials for the CXC examinations on YouTube, so I decided to go ahead and make one. However, being very low on time because I'm actually making other videos, I'm going to be doing this tutorial on the spot with basically no preparation. So I'm just going to test run it, see how it goes, and if you guys like it, well, you let me know in the comments, and of course I will make more later on once you guys are learning from it. Okay, so let's get straight to it. So I'm going to do this a little bit different. When for each video, I'm going to choose a picture. Today I chose a picture of a dog. You're probably wondering why I chose a picture of a dog. When I choose a picture, I'm going to try to get this picture to relate to start off an explanation of a topic that directly relates to the HSB syllabus, and of course the types of questions that come in the exam. So back to the question, why did I choose a picture of a dog? There must be some reason. Well, for one, there are a lot of similarities between a dog, a human being, and there's some similarities also with regards to a plant. So what similarity am I talking about? Well, first of all living things, whether it be a dog, whether it be a human being or a plant, all living things need energy. Alright, so you're probably wondering, well, what does a dog need energy to do? Well, to live, for its heart to beat, for it to bark and go woof woof, to run around. A dog needs energy. Human beings also need energy for a lot of functions, for walking around. You actually need energy to eat. You need energy for your heart to beat, for your brain to function. Of course, plants need energy to grow, all right, and to move substances around its system. So let's get a more technical term going here. I mentioned that living things like a dog need energy. So let's get a fancy word for making energy to sound like a biologist. So I'm going to introduce a word, respiration, and that's the word there, respiration. Respiration is the process by how a living organism makes energy. So let's get a definition here. Respiration. What is respiration? This is how living organisms please excuse my spelling, remember it's on the spot, so if you see any spelling mistakes, well, obviously feel free to mention it in the comments below. This is how living organisms create energy. Alright, so that's a very simple explanation of what respiration is. But obviously, it doesn't, so far I haven't explained the actual process of what is respiration, like how respiration actually takes place in a living organism. Well, before we move any further, I think it's worth knowing that there are two types of respiration. So let's make a note here. There are two types of respiration, and hopefully I'll get enough time to do both today. Respiration. Alright, so what are the two types of respiration? Well, there's one called aerobic, and of course there's one called, well, obviously not obviously, you probably don't know as it, anaerobic. Alright, so one is aerobic and the other one is just aerobic with the word "and" before it. In case you didn't know, aerobic respiration, well, aerobic means with oxygen. And anaerobic means without oxygen. So basically, well, without, when brackets are put no oxygen. So apparently there are two ways an organism can create energy. One by aerobic respiration, and then another one called anaerobic respiration. Okay, so apparently one happens with oxygen and the other one doesn't require oxygen. Now, I'm not going to try to attempt to explain both of these at the same time. It makes no sense doing that. So let me start off with what I consider the easier one to explain: aerobic respiration. So let me move back to this chart. Well, I will be using Notepad to make my little notes and whatnot, right? So let's talk a little bit about aerobic respiration. So that's the one I'm going to choose here, aerobic respiration. I should put the whole thing, respiration. And remember, this is the one that involves oxygen. All right, so let's see. What about aerobic respiration? But let me put the equation for you. For a living organism to create energy using aerobic respiration, like a dog, right? The organism needs to take something called glucose. Now, glucose is a type of sugar. Not the exact same sugar that you put in your coffee or tea, but it's closely related. The basic idea is this: when you eat food, you introduce glucose into your system. So that's how you get glucose into your body, by eating. So what your body will do, it will take the glucose that you ate and then it will combine it with oxygen. When these two combine in your body, and of course we will go into more detail a little later, like where do these two things combine exactly in the body. When these two things combine, you actually get three things. You get carbon dioxide, you get water, and you get energy. Now, this is the one we actually care about, because remember, respiration is how the body creates energy. So it's like this: you take two things, glucose and oxygen, and you get three things. Let me just put that in perspective. You got three things just now. 1, 2, 3. Which is the one you actually care about here? Your body just cares about the energy. The other two are waste products. It's basically, you only want one thing. It's basically, okay, it's like this. You invited one friend to a party and he, well, with him brought 2 other friends with him. Obviously, you don't want the 2 other friends there because you just invited this one person. So the carbon dioxide and the water are waste products. And your body will need to get rid of them eventually, right? So your body will need to get rid of them. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a little while, like how your body will get rid of the carbon dioxide and the water. Body needs to get rid of these, right? And these, what I'm referring to obviously is the carbon dioxide and the water. All right, so let's move on now. So that's basically aerobic respiration. Great. I mentioned that glucose, you get it from eating. But where does the oxygen come from? Well, obviously the oxygen, the main source, well, where it starts off from, you get it from your lungs, because when you breathe, you take in the air, and of course, air contains oxygen. But this is just the beginning, right? Eating and oxygen coming from the lungs, and the two of them combine. Let's talk about where this process takes place. We know the glucose, we get it from eating, the oxygen is from the lungs, but at which part in the body do these two meet and say hello and they combine? Well, I'm going to assume that you know a little bit about plant and animal cells. So over here, I have a picture of a an animal cell, if I'm not mistaken. Right, here's an animal cell. Now, it's a little complex for the HSB syllabus. It has a lot of stuff in it that you don't need to know. But I want you to keep your eye on this guy here, the mitochondrion, right? So you see that it's these little orange things, but it look like little squiggly lines inside of it. So the mitochondria is inside of the animal cell. And remember, a dog is an animal, a human is technically an animal, right? And even in plants, right? The plant cells are different from animal cells, but plant cells contain mitochondria. So inside of this small part, which is inside of the cell, the glucose and the oxygen will meet, combine, and give you your three things: carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And that's a standard question in the HSB examination. Which part of the cell does respiration occur? And the answer, once again, is the mitochondria. So let's make a note there. I like making notes as I go along, and that's what I'm going to do with this series. So I suggest that you make the notes with me. So let me see. Respiration, right, takes place in the mitochondria, right, which is inside of the cell. So just in case. All right, so we have a little bit of notes there, so that's good. So I'm saving the note there. So where can we go from this now? Now remember, I'm only describing aerobic respiration. I'm not dealing with anaerobic. And notice aerobic means with oxygen, and the oxygen is clearly involved in this. All right, so let's move on. So we have the general procedure. What I am interested in now is how the glucose and how the oxygen actually make it to the mitochondria. Remember, the glucose has to reach inside here and the oxygen has to reach inside here. So there must be something delivering these two components to the mitochondria itself. And that item is blood, right? Everybody knows what blood is. Now, blood has a lot of things in it, right? It just so happens blood has glucose in it. When you eat your food, your digestive system will break down the food, and one of the things it will send into the bloodstream is glucose. When you breathe and taking lungs into your when you're taking air into your lungs, the oxygen that's in your lungs is gradually it goes into your bloodstream. So the blood contains glucose and oxygen, just to name two. There are many other things that you find where in your blood. So let's talk about how it actually reaches to the different parts of the body that contain the cells, obviously. So I'm going to start off with a diagram here. I'm going to start off with the heart. Right? So at least you know your heart pumps blood around the body. Some blood all of the time doesn't have oxygen. Sometimes blood has oxygen and sometimes blood doesn't have oxygen. It's really, really important that the heart has oxygen. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to draw a little, I'm going to change the colors here. Over here, I'm going to draw the lungs. It's a little small diagram I'm going to draw here. So over here we have the lungs. And underneath the heart, even though these are not the real positions of where the lungs and the heart are located in our body, right? What color can I use? And over here, I'm going to say the rest of the body. Okay, so your blood needs to reach to the lungs. It has to go to the lungs. Why? Because the lungs is what contains the oxygen. So you can think of it like a car. A car is low on gas. The gas is going to be like the oxygen. When a car is low on gas and it needs to get gas, doesn't it go to the gas station to refill? Well, when blood is low on oxygen, it has to go to the quote unquote gas station. That gas station is the lungs. So what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to use two colors. The first color is going to, I'm going to use a thicker blue line. Let me use a thicker blue line, right? When you see the thick blue line, that's going to represent things like veins or arteries in your body. The blue one is going to represent no oxygen. So whenever you see a blue line going like this, it means that that vein or artery or whatever is carrying the blood has no oxygen. When you see a bright red line, that represents that the vein or the artery has what? Oxygen. If you're not too clear on what a vein is or what an artery is, like you must know what a vein is, right? Or an artery, but if you don't know too much about the vein and the artery, don't worry. Later on in this explanation, I will be going into detail on veins and arteries. So let's start off with blood leaving the heart. Let's assume that you have blood with no oxygen in it. That's not a good thing, because you want the blood to have oxygen, because oxygen is necessary for respiration to take place. So the heart is going to pump out blood through, I'm not going to call it a vein, I'm not going to tell you whether it's a vein or artery. I'm just going to vaguely call it a vein or artery. Well, here what? We're just going to call it a blood vessel. It's going to pump out blood from the heart and go to the lungs. Now notice it's a blue line, because right now, right, I was going to put number 1 here, so you know to, when in the diagram, you know to look at this first. So you have blood with no oxygen in it, and it's going to go towards the lungs. Why is it going towards the lungs? Because it needs to fill up on oxygen. Okay, so it's going to fill up on oxygen. So it goes to the lungs, and the lungs has a lot of oxygen, so it fills up. When it comes out of the lungs, guess what? It's going to have oxygen now, and it's going to return to the heart. So that's 2. And notice it's a red line. So it goes in blue, meaning it has no oxygen. Then it fills up on oxygen and comes out happy, filled with oxygen. And it goes back to the heart. So now the heart contains blood with oxygen in it. So it's happy. So what it will do now, it will share it with the rest of the body. So the heart now repumps, I don't even know if that's a real word, right? But I'm just going to use the word. It repumps the blood out to the rest of the body. So that's 3. Remember, the body itself is made up of what? Cells, animal cells. The cells contain the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is going to use up the oxygen. Also, remember, in this same blood containing the oxygen contains what? The glucose, because glucose, the sugar, is in the blood as well. So when the blood when the mitochondria receives this blood that contains the glucose and the oxygen, it will use up the glucose and oxygen in the process called respiration. And if it uses up the oxygen, when the blood is leaving to go back to the heart, do you think it will contain plenty oxygen? No. It will go back to the heart. Notice it's a blue line, low on oxygen, or well, no oxygen. So let's go through that procedure again. Keep in mind the blood already contains the glucose. So the blood leaves the heart with no oxygen. It goes to the lungs, it fills up on oxygen, comes out filled with oxygen, and returns to the heart. When it returns to the heart says, okay, cool, we have blood with oxygen. Let's pump it out to the rest of the body. The mitochondria in the cells in the rest of the body use up the oxygen in the process called respiration, and when it's finished with the blood, it sends it out of the cells. And of course, it has to go back to the heart, where the heart repeats the process. And the process keeps going on and on and on and on. Okay. So I think I said that over and over, and it should have stuck in your head by now. Let's go into a little bit more detail here. Artery and veins. This is what we need to know now. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about, when we have some space on this side here, I'm going to put veins in blue. Well, it doesn't really matter, right? Veins and an artery. In an artery, blood leaves the heart. Or a vein and an artery is a blood vessel, right? And veins return blood to the heart. Right? Alright, so let's try to identify which ones are veins and which ones are arteries here. Okay. Now keep in mind, right? Well, let's label out of the four which one is a vein and which is an artery. Let's start with one here. Let me get a different color here. Let me get a different color. Let me get green. So, how about number one here? What do you think he is? Well, blood is leaving the heart. You notice the blood is going out of the heart. So I think he will be an artery. Because in arteries, blood leaves the heart, right? How about two? Take a good look at it, guys. The blood is returning to the heart. If it's returning it to the heart, then he is a vein. Okay? Let's look at number three now. Blood is leaving the heart. So this guy here is definitely going to be an artery. He goes into the body uses up the oxygen and glucose and sends it back out to the heart. Keyword, it sends it back to the heart. So this guy here is going to be a vein. So we have just identified the main arteries and veins. Okay? We'll get to technical names and things just now. Okay? What I want to make very, very clear is that when this artery, number three, is going to the rest of the body, it will split up into different arteries. It's just I didn't I didn't draw all. Remember, the rest of the body is the hands. It have the stomach, it have the liver, it have your feet. So this artery, let me I probably should just draw some more coming out, will split up into different arteries. And of course, on the other end, for every artery, there's supposed to be a returning vein. So there are a lot of arteries here and a lot of veins here. One going to, like, once again, connected to the feet, connected to the arms, connected to your liver, connected to your stomach. What I want to name first of all is the name of the main artery before it splits up into the different arteries. Right, the name of this artery here is the aorta. He is the main artery coming out of the heart. Okay, and when he goes down here, he will split up into different arteries. I'm not going to name all of these arteries here today. You just have to remember all of these arteries. You notice I have it in red, contain oxygen, and that's really important. So I'm just going to put a note here. The aorta splits into many arteries each containing oxygen. There's a reason I'm saying this. It's going to come back just now in the explanation. Alright, so each containing oxygen. Right. Now, when it comes out of the body here, right, once again, there are many veins here, right? When they come out here, they have no oxygen. So arteries, right, contain oxygen. So that's like another piece of trivia about arteries. Arteries contain blood with oxygen, right? Obviously they carry blood, right? So they contain oxygen. All of these guys here. Veins do not contain oxygen. Do not contain oxygen. Alright, now I'm going to use the word except, because you may have already figured out something is wrong with my explanation here. I now said arteries contain blood with oxygen, and then I said veins contain blood without oxygen. They do not contain oxygen. But look at 1 and look at 2, and this is really important. Isn't 1, look at it, I even label it, isn't that an artery? And isn't that blue? Blue means it's not carrying any oxygen. And look at this guy here, number 2. He is a vein, and he's clearly red. So that means he is carrying oxygen. This just simply means out of all the arteries and all the veins, there are only 2 exceptions to the rule. Alright? This guy here coming out, let me name it one time. His name is the, I'm not too good with pronouncing words, right? I'm kind of tight tongue actually. He is the pulmonary artery. Right? And this guy here, who's coming out of the lungs, the other exception, he is just what? The pulmonary vein. Right? I even downloaded a program, but sorry, I went on it. If you want to know how it's actually pronounced, right, this program here will say it for you. I'm just going to play it for you now. Alright, so that's how you actually pronounce it, right? Okay. So the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary veins, both of them deal with the lungs. They are connected to the lungs, and they are the only exceptions to the rule. So what kind of question can you get in the exam? Well, a staple question is this: which artery does not have oxygenated blood in it? And of course, is the pulmonary artery, right? And if they ask you which is the only vein that has oxygenated blood in it, the answer is the pulmonary vein. Okay, so that's a staple question I noticed in the exam itself. So you notice how much loops we have here. We have one loop going to the lungs, and then a second loop going to the rest of the body. So it has two loops. So you call this type of this is a circulatory system, meaning it's circulating blood around the body. Okay, mammals, humans and mammals, and like dogs, the original picture, have something called a double circulatory system, and that name actually makes sense. Double means two. One to go to the lungs, and then what? When it returns the blood, it goes to the rest of the body with the oxygenated blood. So let's make a little note of that now. I like making the notes, you know that, right? So let's kind of summarize what we learned here today. Veins. So let's veins here. Let's talk about artery, A-T-E-R-Y. What do we know about the artery? Artery, they carry blood. I should write it underneath here. 1. Artery, they carry blood away from the heart. Also, what else do we know about the artery? And I'm going to keep updating this list, right? Arteries carry oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood just means it has oxygen in it. Except, which one? Do you remember the word? The pulmonary artery. Okay, right. So that's two things we know about the artery so far. And the vein, well, it's kind of like the opposite of the artery. They carry blood back to the heart, or towards the heart. Also, they carry deoxygenated blood. Except, which one of, out of all the veins in the body, only one of them carries oxygen in it, and that's the pulmonary vein. Alright, so that's two things. I'm going to keep adding to this list as we go along, right? Because there are many other things about arteries and veins that we need to know. Okay, let me go back. Where did I have this document? Okay, so we're back over here. Let's talk about the arteries in general. What do we know about arteries? First of all, let's look down here. The artery, in general, most of them take blood out of the heart. So the blood is now coming out of the heart. So that means the pressure will be high. So the blood pressure will be high in the arteries. In the veins, after the heart pushes out the blood at a high pressure, after the body uses it up, you can think of it like this, it kind of slows down, and then it goes into the veins. So the veins do not contain high pressure, well, with regards to the blood. They contain blood at a much lower pressure. So that's another difference between arteries and veins in general. I'm not talking about the exceptions, the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. I'm talking about the vast majority of the arteries and veins. Alright, so let's go here. So that's another thing. Arteries have a high pressure right? Well, we're talking about the blood pressure here, right? And in veins, they have a low pressure. And I'm talking about the blood, obviously, once again. Okay, so if one of them has a high pressure and one of them has a low pressure, shouldn't one of them be stronger than the other? To handle something with a high pressure, you need something with, like if it's a hose, you need something with thick walls that can handle the pressure. And if something has a low pressure, like a water hose, then the rubber around it doesn't need to be too thick. So let's draw something here. If we were to take an artery and we were to cut it, let me keep the colors consistent. Artery is red. So an artery, if we cut it and look at it from in front, the walls of the artery, this here is the walls I'm shading here. The walls will be thick, right? It's thick walls, right? Now, obviously, there needs to be a hole in the middle for the blood to flow. This hole is called the lumen. And because the walls are so thick, they take up most of the space. So the lumen, the hole, is small. Doesn't that make sense? Because the walls are what taking up the most space, right? So I just well, we'll get into more detail after. Let's do the basics, because usually I found that when you take a topic and you explain every single detail first, it confuses the student. I prefer to take the approach where I explain the big parts first, the major parts, and then we chisel down to the details. So the veins. Well, the veins have low pressure. So that means the walls will be what? Very, very thin compared to the artery. So the wall says what it's a horrible drawing, but I think you get the idea. But notice how big the hole here is. This is the lumen. So the lumen will be what? Large. So that's another difference I think we could add into our list when it comes to the artery and the vein. I think that's another thing we could add in. So the artery, number 4, has thick walls and a small lumen. Veins, on the other hand, have thick walls. No, sorry, thin walls. Hear me, it's late in the night. Thin walls and a large lumen. So that's some standard questions they love to ask you in the exam, right? Differences between a vein and an artery. Alright, so let me see where we are at. I tried to keep the video to an hour. I actually forgot to time myself, so I have no idea how much time has passed. Alright, so just to recap, we started off with respiration. That respiration needs 2 things to perform in order to perform the process: glucose and oxygen. And when they combine, they get carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So the question was, how did the oxygen actually reach into the mitochondria where respiration takes place? And that is how we came to the circulatory system. So now we know how blood reaches in. We know how the oxygen reaches, well, sort of, to the cells of the body. But we have a small problem, right? Let's view this from a realistic point of view. Cells are really small, right? There's no going around, there's no way to go around that. Cells are really, really small, to the point where you need a microscope to see them. So if this is your cell, right? This is your animal cell here, and your mitochondria is living inside of that, right? The artery is coming in. So this is the artery here, the big blood vessel with its thick walls here, right? And leaving this is the vein. The vein with its very, very thin walls. Now, obviously, I'm not drawing this to scale here because I know you could see a vein and you can see an artery with the naked eye, because veins and arteries are really big in comparison to a cell. So think of it like this. The artery needs to feed this oxygen. So it needs to feed it oxygen. So I'm going to draw an analogy here. Let me see. I suppose I have the picture up here. I hope I have the picture up here. If not, I'm easily find it. It's not a problem, right? Right. So I have the picture here. Alright, so I'm going to get back to that picture just now. You find it strange here, but let me tell you what I'm getting at here. Here I have an ant. This is supposed to be an ant with this. These are insects, so yeah, 7 legs. But you get the picture. Say we want to feed this ant. Would we feed him with this? Would we tell the ants to say and try to put that in its mouth? Let's say that whole thing is filled with sugar. That would be crazy because the size difference between the ant and this excavator is ridiculous, right? That's not going to fit into the ant's mouth. A similar analogy can be drawn here. The artery and the veins come like the excavator. They are too big. Well, the artery is too big in comparison to the cell. And so it won't be too ready to fit together. For you to feed the ants, you will need something much, much smaller. You will probably need a piece of thread, like something like small or thin like a piece of thread that you can dip into the excavator, and once you get enough sugar in it, then you put it in the ant's mouth. Something very similar is going to go on here. What's going to happen? This artery here is eventually going to break up into smaller pieces. So they're going to break up into smaller branches, and these smaller branches will break up into even smaller branches. It's like a river. You know how a river is? When a river, it breaks up into smaller rivers called tributaries. It's very, very similar to that. So let me draw another drawing here, right? So that one is getting pretty complex. Let's draw back the cell in the middle here. So this is your cell with the mitochondria. Here, I'm going to draw a very thick line, right? This thick line is obviously, red line is going to be your artery. I think you understand that red means artery by now. And the blue line is going to be your vein. Right. So the artery is going to break up into smaller parts now. So small that they can actually be on the same scale as the cell, so they can make proper connections to it. And then the same thing has to go on the other side. When the cell is finishing using up all the oxygen and glucose, and now it has to connect back to the main to the bigger vein. Right? To the bigger vein. Of course, it has to use very thin strands, and of course, all of them will merge back to form a connection with the vein. Here we have the artery. Here we have the vein. So what do you call these guys in the middle here? These small thread-like blood vessels. These guys are called the capillaries. And capillaries are ridiculously small. Remember, they have to be so small to kind of connect or be on the same scale as the cells. So in the exam, if they ask you what are the 3 types of blood vessels, now you know. Veins, capillaries, and arteries. Okay, guys? So let me see. So far, let me make a note here. What are the 3 types of blood vessels. Standard question in the exam. And the three types are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Alright, so hope that will give you some marks in the exam, believe me. If you ever seen a past paper and whatnot, right? Those are standard questions. They will ask you. Alright, so that I'm just checking my notes here. I know I prepared some notes and it's some basic scribbles here, hoping I'm discussing everything. So I discussed the double circulatory system, respiration, what capillaries are, right? Oh, right. So let's go back to respiration here. So now I have to discuss how your body gets rid of the carbon dioxide and the water. Remember, your body doesn't want the carbon dioxide. And believe it or not, your body doesn't want this water. This water was created in respiration. So what will happen, right? Remember, when at this point here, respiration occurs. So what will come back out here in these veins? Well, coming into the veins here, you will have carbon dioxide. That's going to put CO2. That's the chemical formula for carbon dioxide. And you have H2O. And of course, this blood doesn't have any oxygen. So what will happen now? The veins will go back. And remember, when it reaches inside here, it will push it to the lungs. Let me scroll up here. So the carbon dioxide and water, they go back here and then they get pushed to the lungs. And your lungs, when you breathe out, will get rid of the carbon dioxide and it will get rid of the water. Now the water here is in gas form, water vapor. That's really important. When you breathe out, there is more water vapor in your breath. Okay, so that is how your body gets rid of the two waste products created during respiration, just by sending it to the lungs, and the lungs will just exhale it. This process of getting rid of waste products, I know we just call it breathing out, but this breathing out is getting rid of two things you do not want. So you call that process excretion. Excretion is how your body gets rid of things it doesn't want. Now, this type of excretion is only one type of the many types of excretion, because believe me, your body is a very complicated process, and respiration is just one of the many processes happening in your body. There are many other processes in your body where waste products are created, and your body has other ways of getting rid of those other waste products. But that's not for today's video, okay? That's for another time. So guys, I really hope that this video was helpful. Like I said, I'm apologizing in advance. It's on the spot, and the main reason is because I'm very low on time. So when I'm doing these tutorials, it's just a 2 minutes preparation I'm going to do before, and then I'm just going to start explaining on the board here. So let me know what you guys thought about this video, right? Oh, let me show you the notes here again, just in case some of you all need to see it, right? So let me just make it smaller, so in case you just want to freeze the screen and see it, right? Let's make it a smaller font. Let's make it 18. No, it's not 18. Let's see if 22 works. All right, so let me make it a little bit smaller. Feeling kind of bad here. Oh, it's on the spot. All right, let's make it 14. Right, everything is fitting there on the screen. So that's basically a good summary of some key things that happen in today's class. And once again, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments if I should continue this series. And of course, take care and have a good one.